Om Apyayantu mamangani Vakpranaschakshushrotramatho Balamindriyani cha sarvani Sarvam Brahma Upanishadam Mama Brahma Nirakuryam Mama Brahma Nirakarot Anirakaranamastvanirakaranam me astu Tadatmani nirateya upanishadsu dharma te mayi santu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. In this class, we will in fact continue with that very section, namely the 14th section of the 3rd chapter. We had seen the first mantra in the last class, which was our 3rd session. And in this session, which is the 4th session, we are going to see in that very khanda, 2nd and 3rd mantras. That means we pick up exactly where we left. As most of you surely remember, we saw the well-known portion, Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma. All this is Brahma only. Tad Jalaniti Shanta Upasita. Must meditate upon the Supreme Brahman as that in which everything is born, Tad Jala, that in which everything merges back at the end of a cycle, Talla La Liyate, and then that in which everything is sustained, everything breathes, Tadana, Ana meaning Prana, Praniti. Tajjalaniti Upasita, Shantaha Upasi, free from the worldly likes and dislikes. Therefore, great masters have said, when you truly spiritually evolve, you actually will not be able to pursue certain professions at all. Everything has an exception. There may be some exceptional illumined person who may do any profession, take up any. But otherwise, things like being in politics, being a policeman or a police officer, being a lawyer, attorney, being a soldier, army, navy, air force, etc. Some of these walks of life are by and large not conducive to the higher way of living. Once more, exceptions do exist because true illumination permits you to live in any manner. As Bhagavad Gita uses an expression, Sarvatha Vartamanopi Mai Saha Vartate. Sarvatha Vartamana. So, there is a provision, but by and large, saints and sages withdraw from certain ways of living. But more than the outer walk of life, professional field, as the Upanishad used the word Shantaha Upasita. And Adi Shankara explained Shantaha as free from likes and dislikes. Ragadvesha Rahita. That was half of the first mantra. which we saw in the last class. Maybe I made a quick reference to the second half of the mantra, but in this session I will read that out. In the very first mantra, before we take the two mantras, second and third, which are specially picked up for this session, I must say, Atha Kalu Kratumayaha Purushaha. The Upanishad says, our life is so much shaped by our values, our decisions, our mindset, our resolutions, what we regard as this is what I want, I am going to pursue it, and so on. Kratu. Kratu is sankalpa. Kratu is nishchaya. Kratu is adhyavasaya. That's another word used by Sri Shankaracharya. And let me show you. For the simple word Kratu, which is used in the very first mantra, Adi Shankara gives several synonyms which are worth pondering. We'll see that and then plunge into the next mantra, which is of special interest to us. Yes. Kratuhu Nishchayaha. There was a girl in my small town where I grew up. When she was 12-year-old or so, in front of her eyes, her father passed away because of some illness. She was shattered. And that day, in front of all relatives, she said, "Ah, I wish I were a doctor. This would not have happened if I was a doctor." And she announced, "I am going to be a doctor." Kratu, Adhyavasaya. As Adi Shankara adds an expression, I highlighted in my copy, Evameva na anyatha iti avichalaha pratyayaha. My life will now in this direction, not in any other direction. In such an idea, vichalaha means moving, avichalaha or achalaha means unshakable. We have seen before also in a couple of sessions on the Upanishad how sankalpa is emphasized. Do not look at sankalpa negatively. Do not look at it as some mad state of mind. Maybe it is mad from the highest point of view, where one is free of any sankalpa. The illumined state is marked by your being like a dry leaf. A dry leaf gets separated from its tree and goes wherever wind takes it. A Jivan Mukta is described sometimes as a dry leaf that is floating in the air. But we are not talking of a Jivan Mukta. We are talking of two categories of people. One is people who don't know where they have to go, where they want to go, who simply do one thing today, another thing tomorrow, who write down their goals, but their daily life doesn't reflect at all that goal. There is so much of division between what they think is to be done and what they actually do. In contrast to that kind of people lacking in integrity, lacking in focus, there are some in the second camp who have a clear understanding of what they value and they live accordingly. Evameva na anyata avichalaha pratyaya tam kratum kurvita. The first mantra says, whatever clarity of understanding and then bringing one's hands and mind all to that, in line with that understanding, whatever one does in that fashion, so will be one's future. Yatha matihi tatha gatihi. As you sow, so shall you reap. We have sayings to that effect. Kratumayaha purushaha. Yatat kratuhu asmin loke. This is all first mantra. Yatha kratuhu asmin loke purusho bhavati. Tatha itaha pretya bhavati. Not just his or her future in this life, but pretya, even departing from this life. His journey will be determined by the strong thoughts, the strong picture of values that he would have entertained during his life. Anyway, the first mantra concludes with an appeal. Saha kratum kurvita. Kratum kurvita. Now let's go to our first slide. The first slide, the title slide, is based on the first mantra. However, the next 4 slides are about the chosen mantras for this session. Why then bring the first mantra in the title slide? What is said in the first mantra provides the platform. So let's see how the title slide talks about how do we meditate on God. The Sanskrit part of it, as you can see, is Kratum Kurvita. Now this Kratum Kurvita is from the first mantra. Kratu, I already said, is Sankalpa, Adhyavasaya, or Nishchaya. So we have translated that in English. We must conceive. One conceives how things ought to be. Somebody comes back from United States, having spent 36 years or so, conceives a certain ashram. The ashram should have such and such facilities. It should also be a place of service to underprivileged people, along with Vedanta, devotion, etc. Kratu. And then, accordingly, within a few years, there is a beautiful ashram. Suvarnamukhi, Samskriti Dhama on Kanakapura Road, Bengaluru, where I often go. Next month we are going to hold a camp, Alpha and Omega of Om. Otherwise also, that ashram is a beautiful place facilitating a lot of good work. We must conceive. Stephen Covey says, all creation is a second creation. First you create it in your mind, then you create it actually outside in the physical space. We must conceive. In the present Upasana context, it means we must meditate. We must conceive what God is. We may not know God in the perfect, accurate way. The Upasana says, you don't have to be perfect. Have a picture, have an idea which is supplied to you by the Shastras, and to the extent you have understood it, own it, accept it, embrace it. But then, why have we given the title, How Do We Meditate on God? That is the second part, Yadrisham Kratum Kurvita, if a question is asked, in what way should we meditate? How should we meditate on God? Vakshyamaha tam kratum tam sankalpa prakaram tam dhyana prakaram. The kind of meditation you got to do, Vakshyamaha. We shall tell you. Who says this? Adi Shankara. So while the first sentence given here is from the Upanishad mantra itself, the second Sanskrit sentence, which way shall we meditate? We will tell you that. Yadrasham kratum kurvita. Vakshyamaha, vayam vakshyamaha tam, is from Bhāshya. Adi Shankara says, I'll tell you. And following that is the mantra of the Upanishad. So we go to the second slide, where we are guided to meditate in a proper way. But I would hasten to add that this meditation is not of nirguna nirakara. When there is no guna attribute, when there is no akara, form, shape, etc., that is called unqualified meditation. Here the word qualified means some qualification. Anybody, everybody. Nowadays, primarily we talk of academic qualification. What's his qualification? Oh, he is an MA in Hindi. What is her qualification? He is an MTech in computer science. Qualification. But qualified doesn't have to be academic only. Tall and short, fair and dark, intelligent or dull. 1,000 descriptions. So let me tell you, and one reason I chose this mantra for this session is to give you an example of the upasanas that are presented in the Chāndogya Upanishad. Most ashrams do not actually study chapters 1 to 5. We are still in chapter 3. Chapters 1 through 5 are not studied. They go straight to chapters 6, 7 and 8, which are heavily into Moksha Shastra, heavily into pointers to the supreme truth, which is unqualified, nirguna, nirakara. But chapters 1 to 5, which is quite a bulky portion of Chandogya Upanishad, has numerous upasanas, qualified meditations. And this is one example for it. But what is qualified meditation? You worship God, you don't take yourself to be one with God. So this is in the field of Dvaita, and you visualize God in one of many ways, but the way that is given here is pretty close to Nirguna Nirakara. So let's see what is said here. Manomayaha. Manomayaha is expressing as the mind. It is the mind of you and me, which, when a certain form is brought to it through the sense organs, I see a flower, the mind assumes the form, the color of the flower. Then even if I close my eyes, I have the flower in my mind, within me. Isn't it interesting? I see a flower just for 2 seconds and close my eyes. If I have seen it with attention, even though I have closed my mind, I have the picture of the flower in me. If I have smelled it, I am able to recreate that smell within my mind. I am able to feel the touch with my mind. Therefore, millions and trillions of things experiences that you and I go through in life are all made possible by manas. Therefore, Ramana Maharshi in Saddarshanam says, Manomayam tad bhuvanam vadamaha. You think there is a universe around you, but really speaking, it's all in your mind. Universe may exist physically or may not exist. That's a different question. But what causes excitement, joy, sorrow, pleasure, satisfaction, celebration, mourning, and so on and so forth, is what your mind makes of the surroundings. Mind makes of the universe, the world around you. This mantra says, think of God, think of Ishvara. You are a jiva, but think of Ishvara as no other than one who expresses as the mind. So you may even say he is made of the mind. Made of the mind, meaning wherever there is a thought, wherever there is a pratyaya, there is God. Pratibodha viditam matam amratatvam indate. Upanishad says from the same Veda as Chandogya is, namely Kama Veda. Manomaya prana sharira. Prana sharira means having prana as its body. Since thinking has already been referred to by the word manaha, prana here means certain intelligence which understands things, knowing something to be good, something to be bad, as well as doing. Because prana elsewhere is kriyatmaka. We talk of broadly three powers within us: Ichcha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, and Kriya Shakti. So, in this context, prana could be taken as including all of them, Ichcha, Jnana, and Kriya Shakti, especially knowing and acting. Bharupaha, God is the light within. Bha means light. Satya Sankalpaha, I meditate on God. Maybe later in our long cultural journey, God came to be known as Rama and Krishna, Shiva and Parvati, Saraswati and Ganesha. Fine. But the Vedic lore, the Upanishadic guidance says to us, before all those forms came up, initially this supreme Ishvara Tattva is Satya Sankalpa. That means whatever Sankalpa Ishvara takes will come true. You may say there are people also who just do whatever they decide. Here and there they may do. But by and large, since people, you and I, human beings, have the burden of some sin, something wrong we have done, and the tendency is following those wrong deeds of the past don't leave us so easily. We are weakened by our own sin, our own wrongs, our own errors. Pujya Swami Chinmayanandi therefore used to say, a man is not punished for his sin. A man is punished by his sin. The sinful tendencies themselves punish him. No government, no police, no court, no external agency needs to come and punish a man or a woman. Her own, his own vasanas. Whip him up. Satya, so God's case is not like that. God is pure. There is no sin in him. Therefore, whatever he decides comes true. Interestingly, when you and I rise in consciousness to become saints, we too become Satya Sankalpa. The lesser the impurity in us, more is the capacity in any of us to just think, and then what we thought happens. What we thought, the thought comes to us and it happens. So many saints and sages have discovered this. And you and I also have the capacity to be uncovered. Akash Atma, like space, this Ishvara is all pervasive. Sarva karma, sarva kamaha, all actions are his. Sarva kamaha, all desires are his. Adi Shankara hastens to add, not adharmic desires. God would never have adharmic, immoral desires. And to support him, his own statement, Shankara quotes from Bhagavad Gita. Dharma aviruddhaha kamosmi. 7th chapter. Dharma aviruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshava. So God is all noble desires. They are God's expressions. Sarva Gandaha, there also all fragrance. Sarva Rasaha, all good taste. And what about this Durgandha, bad smell, or Durasaha, that is bad taste, etc. That has entered the domain of the experience of you and me because of our sinful tendency. In God, there is no bad taste, bad smell. Therefore, Shankara quotes in his commentary once more, Punyo Gandaha Prativyam Cha. Again, chapter 7. Prativyam Punyo Gandaha. Punyo Gandaha is fragrance. Therefore, you may say Punyo Rasaha. Sarvamidam. Therefore, God is all this. Though the Upasana is one notch below Nirguna Nirakara Brahmachintana, look at this Upasana, this qualified meditation. Though one notch below, it's so close. The first mantra said Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma. This Upasana also is saying Sarvamidam Brahma, Sarvamidam Ishvaraha, Abhyaktaha. Atta means Vyapta. Vyapta, though the roots are different. Vyapti, Vyapi, that has the verbal root ap, apnoti. But here it is at, becomes atta. Some of you have chanted Purusha Sukta. And typically, many of you might have chanted Purusha Sukta. Let me point out something. Those who did not learn Purusha Sukta properly typically make one mistake. And what is that? I have corrected a lot of students while they were studying. Yeah. Towards the end of Purusha Sukta, we have Rishchate Lakshmi Chapatnyau Ahoratre Parshve Nakshatrani Rupam Ashvinav Vyaktam Ishtam Manishana Amum Manishana Sarvam Manishana. The last mantra actually of Purusha Sukta. including the second part which is added. In that you have Ashvinau Vyaptam, and a lot of students do not see properly. Ashvinau Vyaptam, they bring a pa, which is not right. So here too, it's not Abhi Aptaha, but Abhi Aptaha. Though the meaning finally comes to the same. That is, everything is pervaded by God. So you see, Upasana at this level, in this context, doesn't bring, as we said before, the forms of Rama, Krishna, etc. But the idea, all pervasiveness, has come in here. Later, when Prahlada adores Mahavishnu and says Mahavishnu is everywhere, and Hiranyakashipu asks, is your Vishnu in this pillar? And Prahlada says, very much so. And Hiranyakashipu breaks that pillar, stamba. Mahavishnu as Narasimha comes out. So form is given and he is said to be everywhere. So without attaching form, name, etc., Ishvara Tattva has been said to be pervasive. Avaki. Interesting, the last two parts, last two expressions take a reverse turn. Just a while ago it was said, Sarva Kamaha, Sarva Gandaha, Sarva Rasaha, Sarva Karma. Brahma is everything. And now it says, Avaki. Vaki means, speaking. Vak, Vani, Vak, speech. Brahma does not speak. And Anadaraha. Brahma does not go into Sambhrama. Sambhrama, in one of the meanings as applicable here, is excitement at getting something that you desire. For long you had desired, let us say, your own house. And finally you put in all your savings and get a nice house in a nice locality. You get the keys to that house. You and your family enter. There is such excitement, Sambhrama. And these two words say, Brahma does not speak, Brahma never gets excited. This is to dismiss a possible imagination on the part of the Upasaka that Brahma is limited by certain organs, certain instruments, certain faculties, etc. So there is a negation only to dismiss, remove any boundaries or limitations. Let's see the translation in English, then we will get even greater clarity. So how do we meditate on God? This is in the dual qualified context, not the highest Nididhyasana. Meditate this way. How this God is as though filled with the mind, which is thinking. He has the prana, knowing, acting as his body. He is of the nature of light, bharupa. His resolve never fails, satya sankalpa. Akashatma, space is his nature. Sarva karma, all work takes place by and through him. And sarva kama, all desires not opposed to dharma are his. Sarva gandaha, sarva rasaha, all fragrance, all good taste. All this is pervaded by him. Abhyakta. And do not imagine that all forms, names, etc. apply to him. In his true nature, he has no speech. He has no excitement. Now we take quickly a look at some interesting explanations that Adi Shankara has given. Adi Shankara beautifully connects Bhagavad Gita with the Upanishad teachings. For example, I talked in the beginning about Kratu, that is, how you shape your thoughts, and your thoughts then guide you in a certain direction. He quotes in his Bhāshya, Bhagavad Gita, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam yajati ante kalevaram. Whatever is on top of your mind at the time of leaving the body, that decides in what direction, towards what next life you go. A famous shloka from 8th chapter. Then, something worth mentioning, you have this Manomaya Prana Shariraha is also said in the famous Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad. There is a slight difference. Manomaya Prana Sharira Neta. Shankara makes comparison. Please see, Chāndogya is not divergent from Mundaka of Atharva Veda. They go hand in hand. Dharma viruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshava. Gita chapter 7 is mentioned, while Shankara says sarva kamaha has to be desires unopposed to dharma. Punyo gandha prativyam again, chapter 7, 9th verse, which we already mentioned. Let's see a little more. And in support of the meaning he has given to that last part, Avaki and Anadara, does not speak, does not go through excitement or depression. He quotes a beautiful line from Shvetashvatara, where it is said, Apani pado javano grahita, no legs, no hands, negation. Pashyati achakshuhu, having no eyes, he sees all the same. And saha shranoti akarnaha. I personally find this a very powerful statement. You know why? When you appreciate without eyes, this pure consciousness sees. Without ears, it hears. You know what is the implication in sadhana? Our undue attachment to name and form, to these ears, to these eyes, undue emphasis on the body, the faculties in the body goes away. Otherwise, with all Vedanta, we are very attached to our body. One morning, if we find we don't have the sense of smell, we are frightened. One morning, if we find we are not able to see properly, our vision is blurred, we get frightened because we have invested so much emotions in being this personality where the body is the center. But when we meditate on Pashyati achakshuhu, Shrinoti akarnaha, then with due respect for the body, we do not anymore remain attached to the body. And if you are not attached to the body, it's a major milestone in your spiritual growth. But I must hasten to add, being not attached to body doesn't mean you use the body irresponsibly. A wise person takes good care of the body and yet remains unattached. A person who rides a horse, loves his horse, takes good care of the horse, washes the horse, feeds the horse, etc., but knows, I am not the horse. You are the rider and you are not the horse. Now, with this couple of quotes drawn from Adi Shankara, we move to the last mantra for this session. the third mantra gives to us some more clarity on the glory, on the greatness, on the mahima of this Ishwar. Let's see. Yeshama Atma. Ma Atma means Mama Atma. Mama has an alternative form, me, and by Sandhi it becomes Ma. Esha me Atma, Esha ma Atma, Antar Hridaye. On one hand, all pervasive, but don't look for him far away. He is right in your heart. Now, this mantra is pretty simple. Aniyan. Anu means very tiny. Aniyan means tinier, more tiny, smaller than Vrihi, Yava, Sarshapa, Tamaka, Kandira. 5 items are mentioned. These are different grains, paddy and barley and mustard seeds, and a certain seed called Shamaka. Then there, if you peel the external layer, like in paddy, you remove the husk, you get rice. Here too, in Shamaka, remove the husk, you get Shamaka Tandula. From Vrihi you get Tandula, and from Shamaka you get Shamaka Tandula. Without going to the botany or biology, several tiny grains are mentioned, and it is said, meditate on the Supreme Truth as tinier than these tiny grains. And in the same breath, the Rishi says, Eshame antar hridaye prathivyaha jaya, bigger and heavier than the whole earth. Jayan antariksha, bigger, more pervasive than even the interspace. Divaha jayan, bigger or greater than even heaven. Jayan ebhyo lokebhya. You may say there are many other words. Huvaha, suvaha, mahaha, janaha, tapaha, satyam. What about them? Ebhyo lokebhya api jayan. So what does this mean? Let's see the translation. The last slide, number 5. And we get even clearer. This pure self that is inside my heart is tinier than all tiny grain and is bigger than the earth and the other big words. You may think this is madness. Either you say it is tiny or you say it is big. What is this? This is smaller than the smallest and bigger than the biggest. Upanishadic language looks a bit puzzling, but what it implies is it defies description. It is everything, small and big. Himalayas are in it, and it is in even a little atom. If you say Brahma is in an atom, maybe Brahma is smaller than an atom. If you say Himalayas are in Brahma, oh, then Brahma must be bigger than Himalayas. So, Anoraniyan Mahato Mahi. The practical significance of it all is, while all this has its own justification, it's not just making some self-contradictory statements, each can be justified, supported by logical arguments. But in our sadhana, in our contemplation, what happens is we arrive at stillness, we arrive at quietude, we arrive at a certain detachment, then thoughts just go away. A state of understanding where not because of force or suppression, but because of a certain mature understanding, thoughts just leave us. And in perceiving ourselves as awareness free of thoughts, there comes about a liberation. That is what is meant by bigger than the biggest and smaller than the smallest. Now, in all our instruments, the power that makes them work is the consciousness principle. And that consciousness principle itself is not to be visualized as having the name and form of any instrument. All right, before concluding, we will just say that there is yet another mantra where we see the quick meaning. With that, the khanda concludes. The fourth mantra concludes the khanda. Sarva karma, sarva kamaha, sarva gandaha, sarva rasaha, sarva midam abhyaktaha, avaki anadaraha. This much was saying. Eshama atma antarhridayaha or antarhridaye. Now comes the remaining part, which is new in the fourth mantra. Etad brahma etam itah pretya abhisamvita asmi. The Upasaka has all the samagri, material from the Upanishads, and it stays with those thoughts, having become free of raga dvesha, as it was said before. Then have no doubt. The mantra says, Yasya syat, if this kind of contemplation becomes steady in the case of any meditator, lady or man, Adha. Adha is an expression. Wow. Surely, have no doubt. Na vichikitsa asti. There is no doubt here. You should not have doubt. You actually rise to very high planes of consciousness. Presently, your consciousness is way down. Something like in Kundalini Yoga, they say, Kundalini is on a low chakra. All you are interested is in food and enjoyments. As Kundalini rises, it was just in Mooladhara, came to Swadhisthana, came to other chakras, Manipura, Ajna chakra, and goes up to Sahasrara. That's another language to describe a sadhaka's journey, rising. Then what happens? One reaches unbelievable spiritual heights. One's experience of life is then dramatically different. This portion, this whole khanda is attributed. That's one more reason I'm reading out the fourth mantra. At the end of the fourth mantra, where the khanda section ends, it is said, Iti ha sma aha. Thus said, Chandogya, Chandogya. A certain Rishi, Chandogya, discovered these truths as conveyed in this mantra. Iti ha sma aha, Chandogya, Chandogya. So just the four mantras, we are seeing them in two classes, provide to us certain, I would use the Sanskrit word, samagri, certain matter, reflecting on which, with proper guidance, we can turn inwards. Then we will have great energy to do duties, not to get carried away by things which are none of our business. We will have all the energy to do swadharma, but we will have the alertness to keep away from paradharma. Please do not think spirituality would make you dull, inactive, etc. Rather, it helps you do things which are necessary, and keep away from things which are a distraction, which are a waste of time and energy. So this was about Upasana. Hari Om Namah Paramarashibhyo Namah Paramarashibhyah.